So yesterday I was at an FAS staff training on Title IX, and I understand these to be required for all managers at FAS. During the training, they broke us into groups and we did some case studies, and two of the case studies were more or less the same in their facts. They had a male supervisor and a female subordinate, and the male supervisor was persistently asking the subordinate for dates. But in the first scenario, the supervisor was a senior faculty member in a lab, and the subordinate was a graduate student researcher. And in the second scenario, the supervisor was a supervisor in the libraries of temporary part-time undergraduate staff, and the staff person was an undergraduate working 8 hours a week in the library checking out books. And one of the things that was striking to me about it was that even though the facts of the case were the same, the stakes were so much higher in the case with the senior faculty member and the graduate student, because she couldn't easily move to another lab, and the person who she reported to, the department administrator, had no authority over this faculty member. The retaliation potential was so much higher, and the ability to discipline the faculty member just wasn't there. And after that, someone in the training asked, "Are our faculty having one of these Title IX trainings?" And the trainer said, "Well, that's not yet determined. That's not something that's been scheduled yet. It's not easy for us to make our faculty do a training in anything." And so I know that you have some issues with the specific Title IX standard that we have, but given that the faculty are in one of the greatest positions to potentially do harm through their sexual behavior towards students or subordinates, and doesn't it seem like they ought to be part of the group of people who think about the effect of their own behavior and be trained just the same as all our staff are?
How would you go about training them?
I mean, I thought the training I went to was a little long, but substantively, it seemed like it would have worked just fine. Some aspects of it were just reviewing the rules, but then other parts of it involved more or less letting us think about scenarios that were quite realistic that might arise, and thinking about how the different people in the scenarios should have acted and what their options were at different points. I don't see why it wouldn't be very helpful for faculty members to sit down and go through those same set of scenarios of professional interactions that have gone wrong.
It does seem like a good idea, doesn't it?
So why don't the faculty, what's the source of resistance to something like this among the faculty?
I think there's a resistance to being called into meetings and trained in things by people who feel that that training might be needed by others, but not by me. This is a waste of time. I've got an article to write, or I've got something else to do. I'm going to go sit and listen to people tell me what moral behavior is. I know what moral behavior is. Some attitude like that. An arrogance.
Would you feel that way yourself about being asked to sit through a training of this sort?
Yes.
You have an idea about the Title IX standard that you and your students at the law school have worked on that has to do with the idea of an ethical standard that you'd like to teach students to uphold in their interactions with each other, which perhaps we'll talk about in a few minutes. But it's a stark contrast to that, to have a position that the faculty don't even need to think about their own role, especially when they're the people in such a position of power in terms of their own upholding of both the ethical, all of the ethical, the school policy and the legal standards that they're subject to.
Well, I'm not disagreeing with you. And I'm giving you a very personal response. I married my student. Your mother was my student. We've been married now for how many, 40? Don't get me in trouble.
I don't know either, but a lot of years.
So this is not a subject I've not thought about. I don't feel that I'm going to learn more about the subject as far as my relationship with it is concerned by going to this meeting. Now, I could be curious to go to this meeting. I've been curious to go to a Title IX meeting. I've been to one so far. I'm just curious about them as artifacts in themselves. And my problem with the broader issue that you're raising is that it's coming from the Title IX office, which I regard as asserting a prosecutorial philosophy on the university, which is blighting. I think that the impetus for change should be coming up from the bottom and not down from the top. I don't think that we're going to change down from the top. So the idea of a deliberation, I'm all for it. And the idea of exploring a hypothetical abuse situation, whether it's faculty, staff, faculty, student, student, I'm particularly, what I want actually to speak with you about is the pursuit of a hypothetical in the Socratic fashion that I engaged in my youth, following through a basic campus date rape, sexual assault situation. And what I imagine doing is doing it in a deliberative environment in which we follow the narrative through. And at each point where we come to a procedural question about what should happen next, I want to have a deliberation in which we decide what is the procedure by which we deal with these kinds of cases. That would be a true deliberative process that would engage us all in thinking them through in a totally practical, legal, procedural, fair way, and coming to community conclusion about what it is that we were doing. I'm totally for that. But I am not for Title IX telling the Harvard Law School faculty to assemble at a particular time in a particular place to receive a training. I am not for that.
No, I hear you loud and clear. I wouldn't say you're succeeding in speaking without rancor right now.
No, I was just trying to put a little...
I guess the thing that gives me pause about it is I wonder so much whether it matters so much where it's coming from. If you're in the situation in which there are really powerful bad actors potentially within your faculty or within the Harvard faculty who might be altering the course of people's lives in emotionally and professionally damaging ways. And there might be an opportunity for the community or for those individuals to be educated in some way that would help them or help the people who they are victimizing avoid that situation. And whether it comes from the Title IX office or it comes from a bottom-up organization process, I'm not sure I care that much.
Well, if you actually, if we start from the place where I think it makes sense to start, you recognize that Harvard was a male bastion for centuries, and that the changes that have come about since 1960, they're not fundamental. There's still a structure within the Harvard culture that putting female people in positions within the structure hasn't fundamentally changed. So the question then is, well, how would we go about changing? And to me, the idea that we're going to change fundamentally by being prosecuted is not right. It's not right for us, and it's not right as a basic educational approach.
I think it's maybe wrong to say that the Title IX office is seeking to prosecute. Certainly in the form of this training, what they did is got us together, organized us into deliberative groups, and had us deliberate. So they were performing an educational function. There was nothing prosecutorial about it.
Under the threat that if Harvard doesn't comply, then its federal money is taken away, administered by an agency of the Department of Justice.
Well, that's a question of whether Harvard knuckles under to the threat. The question of whether the Title IX officer that Harvard has appointed follows a prosecutorial strategy with respect to the community or an educational strategy with respect to the community is something that's up to her. She appears to be following an educational strategy.
Well, I don't want to debate her particular strategy. I do believe that the general strategy that's been deployed is one of encouraging and prosecuting complaint under a legal structure that's been altered in order to promote conviction. And that's in service of an idea that the way to change the culture of Harvard is to threaten them with prosecution and to follow through and prosecute enough of the young men so that they get the message. I don't like that. I think that's wrong, and that it's the responsibility of Harvard to resist. As leaders in education, we definitely should be out front in innovating in how we change our culture. We're put on notice, fair and square. They've done that. And I have to say, it wasn't easy to get the message through. I'm not sure they've gotten it through yet. In fact, I'd have to say I'm pretty sure they haven't gotten it through yet. But if one were to actually get the message that we need to change this environment in a way that is fundamental, then it's up to us to do that. And we should be the best of anybody at figuring out how to do it.
Well, let me just say that alongside the question of how we have the students deliberate about the way that students interact with each other, I think it's an interesting question of how a member of the faculty would go about galvanizing the faculty to think about their own behavior with respect to students and people that they supervise.
Yes, well, I just very reluctant to be telling my colleagues what they should be doing. I am one of a faculty. I am not the dean.
But you say it should be a bottom-up process. So it would
Students.
start
Up from the students. That's the best.
up from the students for the students, but I would suggest that for the faculty member, it should start with the peers within the faculty.
Well, I'll take your lead. You just coach me. What do you want me to do?
Well, I'm interested. I don't. I think that your great strength is in the Socratic questioning, the taking apart of the issue and finding the core of it, and not so much in organizing bottom-up movements of this sort.
You found me out.
So I'm interested. I'm interested to hear what is the larger strategy of taking the result of a small, something that works on a small level, a small deliberation group, and figuring out how do you expand that so that it takes over the whole student body for a student discussion, or how would you do it if you were doing it at the faculty level? I assume if you were doing it, you might start by trying to convene a deliberation among your direct peers, people with whom you have a strong enough personal relationship to get them to come to the table and talk just on the basis of you inviting them. But then you'd reach a point where you needed to go beyond your Harvard Law School class to all of Harvard Law School, or beyond Harvard Law School to all of the schools in the university with your students, and same with at the faculty level. And it seems like it's a project of the Jury X class to think about how that next level of organization, moving out from just the single jury to the groups of juries, should actually happen. I don't know the answer. I don't even know how we find the answer.